Okay, hello everyone. I didn't have the chance to say anything before lunch, so I take the opportunity now. Anders Wretstrand, Lund University, Sweden. I'm going to talk a little bit about, the title says Vulnerable Population Groups, Experiences Gained and Results from people, for older people in Sweden. I'll freestyle a bit in terms of the title. I hope you apologize. I guess some background, looking at my country and how it has developed in terms of social policy and maybe equity as well. There was a welfare development in Sweden, really starting off in after World War II. We didn't take part of the war, so we had lots of resources that we could spend doing lots of reforms. It had a very sort of high expansion of the public sector. So we kicked off with rehabilitation services, social housing, special transport services over the years, more and more. And these sort of services, they came at a cost. And then in the 90s, disability activists introduced issues of independent living. Theorists, gerontologists, and geriatrics, they introduced aging in place. My friends, they talked about mainstreaming public transport solutions. And interestingly enough, all these things seem to go hand in hand with needs for budget cuts. So there is a conclusion already, number one. So I think this gives you an idea that it could be very important to gather the history of policies, because they are the part of the context and part of the minds of people. What they expect from today is based on the experience gained over their life course. We often talk about that we are an aging society in Sweden. We are regarded as old demographically, but other countries are catching up. The yellow lines are Sweden, and as you see, EU is growing much older than we are, and the red line is Portugal. So Portugal is actually leading the race towards the old society. And this has, of course, implications for transport and mobility. Together with that, we have the new policies of planning or sustainable urban mobilities in our cities. So we focus a lot of cycling and walking and public transport. And there is a problem with that. There is one problem. There might be two problems, but one thing is, if you look at injuries sustained while using public transport, they might not be so visible, the blue bars, but if you take into account accident data from hospitals, pedestrians and bus travelers, they sort of skyrocket. So there's an underreporting of accidents, and this could be, talking about single accidents, for instance. If we look at hospital data, you actually say that we have a lot of single accidents out on the pavements, out in the streets. People actually fall. It's not only older people. It's people my age. I'm a bit old, but not very old. Younger people as well. So vulnerable people are at risk while using public transport and acting as sort of using more sustainable modes. But of course, elderly are at risk. 65 plus, they account for 31% of the sustained injuries. And looking at the divide between the younger old and the older old people, you see that the 75 plus, they actually sustain severe injuries and moderate to a much larger extent than the younger older group. And the younger older group, they are much more sort of active and out and about. So, the last point, accident data could be seen as clear indicator of poor accessibility on the micro level. We had a government bill in 1999 called From Patient to Citizen, also the paradigm shift when we look at disability policy, stating that the built environment shall be accessible and usable for all by year 2010. Well, I can say we haven't realized the intention of this bill, but a lot of effort put into micro-level accessibility for wheelchair users, for people with locomotor impairments and sensory impairments, tactile paving cut curbs, low-floor vehicles, elevator. But there is, to some extent, the meso and the macro level, the thing that we in this group normally speak as accessibility. It's about forgotten. We have been looking into details, but not in terms of how people actually travel or looking at people's mobility on a larger scale. Many older people and persons with disabilities tend to have reduced potential mobility due to their increased susceptibility to issues in the transport system, and there is inherent risk of exclusion due to factors are limited access, safety and security issues, as I just mentioned, poor health, reduced physical and mental capacity, low income, of course, and age and gender-based discrimination, and a mix of these. So I think a particular aim of this sort of part of the TCOS action is targeting the needs and everyday life mobilities of older people and persons with disabilities. And here we have the issue of needs again. And I think in this context, it relates to the activity. Needs is related to activity, and maybe preference is sort of linked to features of a specific mode or activity. Looking at potential and realized mobility, identifying barriers as well as supportive and empowering environments as resources, and do that already in the planning phase of measures and policy instruments, and possibly applying the capabilities approach. And the focus of the capability approach in this step is as such on real opportunities and freedom instead of resources. So it's a bit beyond this sort of first slide I showed you, or the previous slide, about barriers and supportive environment, which is more linked to the traditional human geography approach by Hägersten, for instance. And the conclusion number 2. So I think the challenge of today's training session is to come up with the analysis designs that are possible to apply and useful for studying transport equity with respect to certain target groups with rather specific needs. And I don't think that's easy, but I think if we can brainstorm around that and try to develop a way forward and try to identify some studies that could be conducted in different contexts and addressing maybe specific needs or group needs of older people, I think that we have sort of advanced. Thank you.